Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October edition of Facebook Live. I am Lisa Morgan, a kindergarten teacher and president of the Georgia Association of Educators. And we have with us our government relations and program director, Joe Fleming.
Good evening. Go Braves.
Yeah. So our topic this evening is one that we have been talking about for about a year, seriously. And it is something that as we enter a new legislative season, that we want all our members to know about, understand, and be ready to lobby on behalf of ourselves and our students. Joe, you want to start telling us how we got here, and then we can talk about what we need to do to change things.
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody being on the call, guests, GAE members. We've got state legislators and staff on. This is a priority for GAE, so I appreciate everybody tuning in. And certainly if you have any questions, there'll be the chat box. You can raise those. Lisa will call on you. So the history of waivers before Sonny Perdue, I'm not 100% certain on. But it was during the Perdue administration that we began to see waivers issued for school districts based on financial flexibility. At the time, in the Great Recession, schools were facing real hardships. I think there were furloughs and layoffs, and there were some real tough financial times. And it may have made sense at the time that during that climate, that districts be certain waivers from state law to give them the financial flexibility to weather the economic storm of that time. Waivers have evolved. By the way, those waivers that were granted for financial hardship and financial flexibility were sunset. They were never intended to be a permanent action. Later on, there became waivers, which appear to have been introduced in conjunction with the creation of state charter school systems, what we call strategic waiver systems, and I think traditional schools, of which there are two really in Georgia. Those strategic waiver schools are eligible to apply to the Department of Education for waivers from state law. And best as I can tell, they've never been denied by the Department of Education. If they have, it is a very rare occurrence. So districts now can ask to be relieved of the responsibility of complying with state laws. But rather now than being given in response to financial difficulties, these waivers are supposed to be given in exchange for a promise for student academic achievement. So what kind of waivers are we looking at being waived, and why is this such an important issue for the members of the Georgia Association of Educators? Well, the most easily understood example is class size. There is a law in the books, and there are department rules and regulations that establish the maximum number of students that can be in a class. And it varies from grade level, it varies based on subject level, and it varies based on special needs. For example, music classes have different maximum class sizes. But districts can waive this. And Lisa, how many have waived class size laws?
So we have 132 districts who are strategic waiver systems, and 2 of them aren't on the new chart, but 128 out of the 132 plus the, I think it's 46 charter systems automatically have waived everything.
Right. So just to clarify, if
Yep.
There are three categories of schools again, you got state chartered school systems, you've got strategic waiver systems, and traditional, of which there are only two that have no ability really to ask for waivers. State charter school systems automatically get waivers from anything pertaining to public education law in Georgia. Most of that's in Title 20 of the Georgia Code. Some is in Title 160. But state charter systems automatically get these waivers. Strategic waiver systems, at least for now, simply ask the department for a waiver from state law. Again, almost automatically given. They have to sign a contract showing that there's some academic progress, but even the measurements for academic progress are really flimsy. You could, for example, show district-wide an increase in the number of students in an AP class, even though at the same time your graduation rates and your test scores are down significantly, but that would qualify as proof that the waivers are working and you're showing academic progress, which is of course absurd. But the real problem is that these state laws that legislators like Becky Evans and Rebecca Mitchell and others pass are overridden at the local level by school boards. It doesn't matter what bill you pass, past, present, or future, that can be vetoed essentially by local school districts. And that's the nut of the problem right now. And Lisa, we can talk about specific examples of waivers that are routinely offered. Apparently there's some discussion at the Department of Education about making these waivers for strategic waiver systems automatic in the same way they are for charter systems. But the waiver system is failing and it's failing our schools. And again, if we use class size as an example, we see it. It's exacerbated by COVID, but class sizes are climbing and are above, in many cases, what state law says they should be.
Yeah, Joe, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share with everyone the map. So if you are a member and you do not know which choice was made by your school district, you can see that. The white counties and districts are the districts that are the strategic waiver school systems. The yellow are the charter systems. And then the pink, Webster County down here by itself, and this little pink dot in Gwinnett, Beaufort City, are the ones who are no waivers. So I just wanted to make sure our members could see those and know where they fall. The chart of waivers and share it. I printed it out today, and it is this. And each X represents a system that has waived one of the state laws. So like I said, when I finished with it, I realized that 2 districts are missing. So Joe has put the link in the chat where you can download this Excel file that I have here, and you can download your specific district. We will say for some of the districts, we know they have amended their waiver contracts because they were on the agenda for the State Board of Education, but they have not posted those amendments yet. Some of these, I continue to just be baffled that we would want to waive them. We're going to talk about some of the things that impact educators, but the things that impact students, I just want to say why. For example, Remedial education has been waived by 129 out of the 130 systems. The rules about the alternative education program have been waived by 124. Limited English proficient program for our students who are English language learners has been waived by 127 of the 130 they have on the chart. This one just baffles me, and the number has gone up from the chart we had previously. 124 systems have waived health and physical education. And the thing I say there is, I don't think there's anyone who would say that our students need less health and physical education. I think educators and parents alike would agree our children need more physical education and health. Class size, 128 out of the 130 on the chart have waived the class size. Elementary teachers, 96 out of the 130 have waived duty-free lunch. Yes, waived PE. 124 of these districts have waived the state minimum salary schedule. And I want to point that out as that it is a state minimum. So if the district's saying we're going to waive that so we can pay you more, they can already pay you more because it is a minimum. Waiving a minimum means you want to go below the minimum. 128 have waived part of the certification requirements for classroom teachers. 129 have waived the school day. And then the one on the financials is the direct classroom expenditure control. And 129 of the 130 have waived that. Joe, I'm going to go. We've got somebody that's raised their hand. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. So I'm going to go first. Yes, somebody says to have 2 days of duty-free lunch because they've waived it. They can do that now. Are charter systems permitted to pay us below the minimum state salary scale? Charter systems have a blanket waiver for all of the requirements, for all the state laws and the state board rules. That is with them having their charter. They can write back in the charter and say, we are going to comply with Title 20 and add something back in. But as a charter system, they have a blanket waiver. Maika, you have a question?
Yeah, and mine is about the waiving of the duty-free lunch. So I thank you for the link, and I went and I looked at Clayton specifically. Mm-hmm. And so my question, let me find it, because the way it reads, it says that CCPS seeks flexibility from duty-free lunch periods in exchange for a lunch period for compensation or another benefit. Well, what's the benefit and what's the compensation?
Okay, Maika, you're reading the original duty-free lunch law, correct?
I went from this link that, well, wait, Lisa, you asked me. So I'm reading from, that was the waiver is the employment conditions of employment. And then it says sample justification.
Okay. So yeah, what they're saying is that, and at one point they did this because it was allowed in the law that you wouldn't have duty-free lunch, but they would give you something in exchange for giving up that duty-free lunch. We had some schools that you aren't going to get your duty-free lunch, and we are going to, you get to leave 30 minutes early every single day.
Okay.
Um,
Does this also go for paraprofessionals? You know how, you know that they're for hourly employees. Let me say that. For
right.
Yeah.
I think hourly employees would be, that's a separate question that we would need to ask Mike McGonigal, our general counsel, because these are the state laws specifically dealing with public education. And for example, the duty-free lunch statute is for elementary teachers, and it specifies teachers.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
So let me say one thing, because we do have a few guests on the call. Lisa, we explained to everyone what we mean by duty-free lunch.
Okay, yes, I will. So duty-free lunch in the elementary schools is the one thing elementary teachers are guaranteed, which is that they will have a 30-minute period without students, without duty for their lunch. And it's in the state law. Middle and high school had those provisions built into their their planning time and their preparation times. So particularly this year and this past school year, with our mitigation strategies and the things we've been trying to do to reduce the number of children in the cafeteria, et cetera, a lot of the systems have actually used the waiver they had for duty-free lunch. And educators are feeling that now, where before they weren't. And yeah, I'm going to go back. So, oh, wow. To be clear then, charter systems have a blanket waiver of all Title 20 provisions unless they have positively stated which provisions they will continue to comply with. And that is, and it does include fair dismissal in all of the systems. I will say, for those of you who are in charters, though, that GAE does have a lawsuit because we do not believe that the charter systems should have the blanket waiver for fair dismissal, because that is a protection of due process rights. Okay. So
Lisa, I'm just thinking here,
yes.
You know, obviously I'm a lobbyist. I follow the legislative process. I don't know of too many examples where you can just apply for a waiver from, you know, state law, you know, waiver of your choosing. I mean, really, what's the point of having a House or Senate Education Committee that looks at legislation that's passed by the General Assembly, that's signed by the governor, that can be just ignored so easily? And I mean, we're not exaggerating when we say that virtually every education law in Georgia is something that can be waived. In fact, the code specifically says, here's what can't be waived. And it includes things pertaining to insurance, to the safety of students, parents, visitors, educators. Civil rights issues can't be waived, and federal law can't be waived. But anything else you can think of in Georgia code, not just in Title 20, but for example, there's a waiver pertaining to school buses. There's training that's required of school bus drivers, their health requirements for school bus drivers, their salary minimums, which are tragically low, that all can be waived. And that it's just a dangerous situation to potentially put our students in, and is not good for our bus drivers. But and that's, by the way, in Title 160 of the Georgia Code. So it is not some screaming hyperbole to say that every state law can be. In fact, the code goes further and says the Department of Education can approve waivers for anything else that a district can wants to raise that hasn't traditionally been asked to be from which they can be exempted from, which state laws they can be exempted from. Lisa, one of the things that really troubles me about this is looking at, for example, at programs and curriculum and class size for students that are English as a second language. I mean, probably the worst thing you could possibly do in an environment like that is increase the number of students. But we have laws that we've passed because they're the right thing to do, and they're laws that are passed to improve the standing and the likelihood of success of our students. Then we're just casting them aside with very little deliberation, very little public accountability, and you know, when we talk to legislators and our own members, very little awareness by people of what's being done now and the harm that's being inflicted.
Okay. Pam has been patiently waiting, and then we've got a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to get to. Pam, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. I was looking at the listing for my county, and I saw a bunch of letters and all. How do I understand what those particular codes are? Is there some breakdown somewhere?
Yes. We actually happen to be in the same district in DeKalb. And those are all the letters and numbers of the state laws and the state board rules that they are waiving. If you go to the spreadsheet link that Joe sent,
okay,
it lists all the waiver schools, but if you're kind of okay with Excel, what you can do is you can scroll so that DeKalb is right beside the descriptions, and then you can see what they are. Someone asked in the chat what the purple boxes mean.
Right.
Okay, the green is all the systems had to complete their waiver contracts with the state in 2015 and 2016. That was their original waivers. Then as we've gone through the years, districts have submitted waiver amendments. So if it's purple, that means the district added that one after we started. And it's in their amended contract.
I see.
And you can see that some of them have added a lot, and some of them have not amended their original contracts. The reason we've really been talking about this over the last year and this year, excellent question, Representative Evans. That's what I'm getting to. They were supposed to be reviewed and determined if they would be renewed after a 5 or 6 year period. 2021 was the point at which there was supposed to be a review of all the waivers to see if they are working. And that coincides with the charter school systems have 5-year charter contracts that should have been renewed. And so the Department of Education has indicated that because we have not had standardized testing with valid and reliable scores over the past 2 years, they do not feel that they have actionable data to review the school systems. So therefore, they are going to automatically renew all of the waivers. In fact, they indicated at the meeting that we attended that they intend to not only renew all the waivers, but that they intend to administratively approve waivers for all systems for everything that is waivable, which is a huge concern, that they would just say, you don't even have to request the waiver anymore. You can just start using the waiver. And Maika's asking what can we do about that? And Maika, I want to go back to one of the other questions and kind of lead into that. One of the other people said that they remember that recent legislation in education has been passed that explicitly said these provisions cannot be waived, and that has happened. So can we pass something to make the laws not waivable? And the answer to that is yes. And I hope she's willing to speak for just a moment, because Representative Rebecca Mitchell has been working with GAE over the past year on a bill that would make some of these laws not waivable, and in an attempt to begin the process of ending the waivers. Rebecca, you willing to tell them what you've been working on?
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't know that I get the credit for this, because I think the knowledge base lies within this group, but the idea of the bills we had submitted last year, which was 518 and 519, was addressing several of the waivers that were kind of the higher impact waivers, both for the students, so class size, and also for the educators. So things like, I think it was salary, and it was dismissal protections, right? So the sign, and you know, duty-free lunch. And I know it sounds, it's hard to communicate how important that is unless you happen to be someone who raised 4 children under the age of 3 at some time in their life, which I am. So I totally understand the impact of not having 20, 30 minutes in the middle of your day where you can actually breathe and be a human and be able to go back and deal with all the needs of all the little people who right now are extremely, extremely intense. So we did submit the bill last year. We did not get a hearing. I am not sure where the education committee sits on how they're feeling this year, but I think that's an effort to have a conversation with them. I would love feedback on the question I dumped in the chat too. If the strategic waiver systems are blanket granted all the waivers, how are they now different than charter systems? Are they?
That's an excellent question, and that's what we are trying to determine and learn. Because obviously it was announced at this meeting that we attended this summer, but it hasn't been something that, to my knowledge, has formally come from the Department of Education to the school systems. And while we're there, I want to go back. Somebody asked a question in the chat and said their school system, why is Atlanta Public Schools allowed to use a waiver to abolish the teachers' positions? And they were told it was a charter system that's different from the other metro school systems. Atlanta Public Schools are a charter district, and they do have that blanket waiver from the, so yes, they can change. They don't have to comply with class size. They can do all of these spreadsheets. And yes, the spreadsheet is the strategic waivers. There is not on the Department of Education website a listing like this for the charter systems. But I think the charter systems are supposed to, and I know the waiver systems are supposed to, have this information readily available on their websites. And if it's not there, we can always, I have discovered that searching the State Board of Education agendas, you can find a whole lot of things that should be in plain sight that is not. So Maika's question, what can we do about that? Obviously, we have Representative Mitchell's bill. And Joe, you want to talk about what we need to do strategically to try to help move this forward.
Yeah, so the good news for us is that we have a special legislative session coming up that begins next Wednesday, actually, where we will have a captive audience of legislators at the Gold Dome. And correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Evans, but I think some legislators who are not on the redistricting committees may have a little extra time on their hand, which will be a good time to meet with the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee to further educate them on this. But there are many of our very, very good friends on public education who, until we have raised this, had no idea that this is taking place, that districts can just ignore the law with permission from the Department of Education under authorization granted by the General Assembly. So we will be using that time to talk to legislators. I would like to say, if you are on this call and you're not a GAE member, but you want more information on this subject, please put your email in the chat box and I'll make sure you get on our distribution list for waiver related materials. But we are grateful for Representative Mitchell, who's really taken a strong interest in this and is a great advocate for it. She's not on the Education Committee, so that's where the bill has been referred. Our goal is to get a hearing this year and to really build a case and make and create an awareness of the problems that these waivers create. Representative Evans, did you have something?
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad to be with you all tonight. Thank you for bringing this important issue up. And I've certainly heard about it from my teacher friends, especially about the class size issue. And I haven't really understood why it was that these waivers are, why they're still getting waivers, all these years later. So now I understand it. This is very helpful. So what, for this bill last year, Joe, did you talk with the chair of the committee, with Matt Dubnick and with Chris Irwin? And Rebecca, did you talk with them as well? Or, because I didn't hear anything about it last year. So.
The answer is yes. We have talked to the chairman, Matt Dubnick from Gainesville, and Chris Irwin from Habersham County. We kind of got run over by vouchers a little bit last year. There was a House voucher bill.
Yeah.
There was a Senate voucher bill that got overplaced. But the number one priority for the special session is to convince them of the need to hold a hearing on the bill. So we will be meeting with the Republican leadership on that. Because they ought to be as concerned about this as anybody else.
Yeah. And Rebecca, I would say to you, when I've talked to Chairman Dubnick and Vice Chair Irwin about Donna McLeod's bill, they were like, it's, if you can go to them, ask for an appointment with them individually, and that, just see how that goes too, and try to be persistent, and get their attention. I think that's helpful as well. And
Becky,
if you can get your school system, if you could get your, what's the school system your kids are in or that you represent?
Gwinnett, and my kids are in it.
Yeah. So I would see if, maybe, and can you have, what's interesting, actually, what do the school system, what do the superintendents say? Are they saying, no, we want to keep these waivers, or so they're going to be lobbying against it? Is that,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the school systems want to keep the waivers because many of these waivers are being, they are using them to save money. And
We haven't had So the average class size in Gwinnett is 38. It's expected that there's 38 in that classroom.
It's just awful. Wow.
Yeah.
That was, that was happening like during Katrina. That was like, and that was, but that shouldn't be going on all these, over, 15 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Maika, you had another question?
Well, you kind of touched on it, Lisa, about the superintendents, in school systems. We're going to be fighting against them too. But what I want to know from, just so we can be, have as many boots on the ground as we can in the special session. If we can have an planning day where we are, we basically get talking points, and like those of us who can take off and be at the Capitol to talk to, different representatives. I have a representative that represents Clayton and Henry. I live in Henry, I work in Clayton. But, just so we can have that direct approach and have as many people down at the Capitol during this special session as possible, and that we're very concise and we're all speaking the same thing.
Yes, ma'am. And we are working on that and having the specific talking points ready for everyone.
Gotcha. And if you could give us dates, like when you have it, just so we can put in for it and get as many. Thanks, Lisa.
Yes, Joe will. It will be a special legislative alert coming soon.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. And someone asked a question again about duty-free lunch for teachers that have a 504 plan. That would be a separate issue because the 504 plan is federal law. And that's the one thing they cannot waive is federal law. But it would be for that individual teacher. It would not be for the other teachers in the system or in the building.
To Becky and Mike's point, when the bill was introduced, we didn't exactly get a lot of love from our allies, frankly. Nobody's come out against it, but I do think Lisa's outlined reasons why the School Board Association, the School Superintendent Association might not be real excited about the bill. They may be doing the right thing in their mind and not abusing this, but I think Lisa's right. They see it as something that gives them financial flexibility, even though that's not the reason that vouchers exist right now. It is not about money. It is about academic performance.
It's supposed to be.
Yes.
And yeah, in the chat, Adam
The waivers,
said,
not waivers, not vouchers, right?
yeah, waivers.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
And Adam put in the chat that the school waivers were for budgeting flexibility. And that was true in 2007, 2008, when they began, because obviously we had budget cuts, we had austerity cuts that ended up taking over $2 billion with a B dollars from public education. So they were allowed the waivers at that time specifically for funding and cost cutting. Those waivers went away and they started the strategic waiver systems, and the strategic waiver system contracts explicitly say these waivers are intended to increase student achievement. However, we know they are still being used for cutting budgets, for saving money. And one of the things about this that is happening is many districts have these waivers and they have not been utilizing them. But now during COVID, they are utilizing them. I know my school system has had a waiver for duty-free lunch since the beginning. However, they weren't utilizing that duty-free lunch waiver. I was getting my duty-free lunch every day. Now that there's COVID, teachers are not getting that duty-free lunch. We know that class sizes are continuing to increase, even though we're in COVID and we need to be doing the opposite for health and safety of students. So we believe that the superintendents and the school boards are going to be opposed because they know they are using the waivers to save money. The one that I, as an educator, the one that just scares me is the fact that if the department does automatically renew them and say every district has all the waivers, which then that does give a very good question. What's the difference in a charter district and a waiver district at that point? They are administratively waiving fair dismissal. Fair dismissal is, if you look at the categories and the number of districts that have waived the different items, fair dismissal is the lowest one. And that is, in what I believe, that is because school boards understand that waiving fair dismissal is something that educators will stand up and fight back for. And so we are at that point where we are going to have to stand up and fight back, or our fair dismissal will go away. And then those protections that we have to speak as a public citizen, to speak as a member of the organization, those literally do go away if we do not have fair dismissal, because then you can be dismissed with no reason at any time. And that is certainly not good for educators in the current environment, when we know there are going to be those people who are going to file complaints against educators and even attacks against educators because they are teaching with honesty and integrity in their classrooms.
May I ask another question?
Yes, ma'am, certainly.
So what are we asking for? Are we asking for the waivers to be reviewed before they're renewed, or what are we asking for?
We are asking that the waivers be, in a perfect world, we would say no more waivers. You would have to go back to individually. If you needed a waiver, you would have to individually apply and show the need for the waiver. House Bill 518 eliminates the waiver for class size, fair dismissal, teacher certification, and the minimum teacher salary scale as a starting point. One of the other concerns that we have with the waivers and even the renewal process, when this system was begun, the systems had to make the decision whether they would be charter system, waiver, or stay Title 20. They were required to get input from parents and the community before they made that decision.
I remember
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes. And the renewal or amending the waiver contract does not require any parental input, any community involvement. The board simply passes a resolution. So we feel like parents have been left out, the community's been left out, and these decisions are being made in many cases absent that involvement that should be there as oversight. Yes, ma'am.
About PTA, they would be a good ally with this, wouldn't they?
Yes. Yes.
And then other teacher groups, like, could you all work with them on that, and I know there's some newer teacher group too, like maybe all the teacher groups could be on the same page with this. What do you think?
That'd be
We
great.
will welcome anyone who wants to fight with us on this, but I am not optimistic that everyone will be on board. Standing up for something like this is not something that all the groups are often willing to do.
But have you had any conversations with your colleagues recently about this?
We haven't recently. Last year when the bill was first introduced, we discussed it. Joe?
I don't have anything to add to that. It would be great to be all on the same page, and we should be on the same page on something like this that directly impacts our kids. Yeah, I mean, just kind of look at this from a higher high altitude. I don't want to leave this call unless everybody understands what is taking place right now and what the impact is. We have got a lot of work yet to do to educate legislators. We've talked about that. We've got a lot of work to do to educate our colleagues in education. Your colleagues that may be members of other groups, your colleagues in school, because there's just not an awareness of this, that the fact that, and this is not hyperbole or exaggeration, they can waive any educational law virtually in Georgia. Anything that you guys pass at the General Assembly can be waived. There's an interesting example this year of there was one bill that passed on early intervention that actually has a sentence in it that says this cannot be waived. So somebody is in the General Assembly is beginning to understand that there are that these waivers do exist, and hopefully that's somewhat related to the education campaign we've tried to initiate. But I want to make sure everybody understands what the waivers do, why they're bad, and to talk to your friends and neighbors about it. So if there are any questions, please definitely speak up.
And we did have someone ask if we could send you the links and the information, and we will. Everyone we have a lot more people that signed up that weren't able to join us tonight, and we will send an email to everyone that is on the call tonight with a link to the recording. Today's Tuesday, so it will probably be Thursday. We'll have to go get the recording, but once the recording is posted, I will send you the link to the recording and all of the links with the information that we have provided tonight. So any other questions about waivers or the charters?
Lisa, hello. This is
Yes,
Marafi
ma'am.
Marshall from Richmond County. My question is, and I talked to Joe before about this, we emailed about this. If you have a principal that is not honoring or is dead set on not allowing the staff to do duty-free lunch, how would you handle that in a tactful, discretionary way?
Well, Marafi, the problem is, and I'll look it up, but if your system has waived duty-free lunch, then the only way you get the duty-free lunch is if the principal decides to allow you to have it.
So it's up to the principal's discretion.
Yes, because if they have waived duty-free lunch and they have waived the law requiring you get duty-free lunch, then you no longer have a right to it because the school district has waived it.
Okay, I remember before when you came to Richmond County, I think you said we have like 4 waivers.
No, most of the districts have a whole bunch of waivers.
Okay, so so 4 is not the limit.
No, there
Okay.
are 4 that the big 4 were the 4 that systems were required to pick one of those 4.
Okay, okay.
And every system had to choose one of those 4. But most of the systems, I'll be honest, what I think they did, they were given a list of what they could waive. And some of them, it looks like they just thought it was a checklist and they just went down and checked all the boxes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Someone asked, what does it mean to waive certification? If they waive the certification requirements, that means that they are not required to have a teacher teaching the class who is certified in that content area. So, for example, they can have the social studies teacher teaching language arts. They could have the math teacher teaching science, or they could have someone who is not certified at all teaching the class.
Hi, Lisa. This is Janice Richards. So how much of this is being shared with the public? Because I can't imagine a parent knowing they don't have a certified teacher in the classroom and feeling comfortable with that.
Janice, the answer to that is in 2015 and 2016, when this started, the systems were required to have public comment about which system they were going to choose, whether they would be waiver or charter, or that they would remain, it was called traditional then, Title 20. Since then, they have not been required to communicate with the community or communicate with parents about these issues. In fact, I know of one school system that is a strategic waiver system that amended their waivers, and they literally brought it up at the school board meeting. They told the school board members, we're just cleaning up some of the language, and the school board members passed it and sent it to the state. And when we saw it go to the state, they were waiving fair dismissal. That wasn't cleaning up the language. There is no requirement after that initial decision that parents or the community be involved. And yes, many current parents didn't have children in school then. I'm sure there are a lot of parents who didn't have children in school then. And yes, it's been going on for the last few years. 2015, 2016 was when these waivers started. And this is when all the systems were required to make the choices. But many of our parents don't know. Many of our parents don't realize often, if you think about particularly our elementary children, they don't go home and say, yeah, mommy, there's 21 people in my room today. We counted and there were 21 of us. That's not something that happens. Parents might find out in middle school and high school, because we know students are going home and saying, you know, I had to sit on the floor in the back of the room because there were no more desks. You know, or they go home and say, you know, today's my day in science to sit at my desk and do busy work. I'll get to, while half the class is doing the lab, I'll get to participate in the lab tomorrow. And in some cases, I think that it has been happening. So we have become so accustomed to it that we kind of feel like, well, that's just the way it is. And it doesn't have to be that way. And it shouldn't be that way for our students. Going back to certification and class size, I'm just going to say every student in our classrooms deserves a qualified, caring, committed educator and a class size such that they can get the attention and the individual attention they need to be successful. So,
Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I know it's expensive when it comes down to marketing, things like that, but is there ever consideration to maybe put up a billboard, maybe run commercials or something? I'm not quite sure how expensive that could be, but just something, because there's just so much information that the public doesn't know, that if they did know, they might make different decisions.
Janice, I'm going to say that I know Joe's been on the phone today.
Yep.
We are working with NEA, hoping we can get some grant money from NEA to really put some funding behind our efforts around this for the legislative session.
Lisa, are you aware of any other state that allows local districts to veto state law or to waive state law? It seems pretty unique to Georgia.
I am not, and I know when I say something about it, when I'm in meetings with my colleagues from around the country, the looks I get are complete and utter mortification, and they are horrified that that's what's happening here. I don't think there are other states that allow this.
And Janice, I just want to mention, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think one of the reasons State Representative Mitchell was interested in supporting this bill is she's got 4 kids of her own, and I think she looked at it exactly through the lens that you suggested, and that is as a parent. Was astonished that this kind of stuff was going on, and nobody is aware of it. Nobody's talking about it. We aim to change that.
I'm astonished as a teacher and as a community member, because whether you have kids in school or not, I think it's going to impact your communities as well. So I don't think it's something that should be just swept under the rug or taken lightly. And we just got to hold these people accountable for their actions.
Yes.
May I have one more comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I definitely agree that this is a huge problem, but I guess I would just want to, and you all have been around longer doing this, Joe and Lisa, longer than I have, but I also just feel like the atmosphere in the Capitol, is almost, like, again, I suppose I feel like it's against public education. I mean, it's not totally there yet, so I guess I would, and I'll say this to my contacts with the superintendent and the school board lobbyists. I mean, it would be really, it's important for public schools to try to unite on in some way about this issue, because otherwise it can just be used as, look how messed up they are, let's just continue to, they just can't work. I mean, and so I feel like there's some people, who, just don't want that. So I feel like it's important, if at all possible, for all the advocates for public schools to come to some agreement about this. I mean, it's at least, add back in public comment and actually review the requirements and actually ask for the accountability, to show the improvement, at a minimum. I just can't see how they could not agree with that. I mean, I understand they want their flexibility, but
Yeah,
we need,
it shouldn't be a partisan. It shouldn't be a partisan issue either. I mean, it's something that Democrats and Republicans should agree on.
Yeah.
And again, if I were a legislator, I'd be kind of offended that my work on public education in the Capitol really ultimately means very little when it can be overridden by a waiver.
I described it as the each individual school board has veto power over the legislature and the governor. The legislature passes something, the governor signs it, and the school board says, oh, no, we don't think we want to do that, and waive. And that's not where we need to be when we're all working to improve public education for all our students.
Yeah, and if it becomes automatic, it just becomes even more troublesome.
Yeah. Okay. So it is 7:29. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your questions. If you're a member of GAE, and I hope you all are, I want to thank you for being with us this evening. If you are an educator and you are not yet a member of GAE, This is your personal invitation from me to go to joingae.org and join our association. And I will be emailing everyone the information from tonight, and you should receive that on Thursday. Thank you all and have a great evening.